Hey everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. This is going to be another episode of Jim Bob in the Weeds, where I sit and ramble on while pulling weeds. Probably go a little bit long, so if you're not into that, that's fine, whatever. Today's subject, well, the main gist of what today's talk is going to be about is why do I garden? What is it about gardening that makes me want to do this? All this work, all this effort, sometimes all the disappointment. What makes it worth it for me to do it? Let's be honest. If you look at it from a purely financial standpoint, the amount of time put into growing a garden probably would be better served by getting a job. I can still get a job. I'm young. I'm still not over the age of 60. And I know plenty of people who work well beyond the age of 60. So why in the world would I want to grow a garden? Grocery bills for most people, for a family, let's say, probably run on the high side about $200 a week. Tops. Well, I won't say tops. I would say that's probably a decent amount of money that most families can get by with very handily. That's including buying chips and cookies, because chips and cookies are important, especially cookies. But so $200 a week, you're talking about a 40-hour work week. That's what, $5 an hour, right? 5 times 4, yeah, that'd be $5 an hour. It seems like a lot. And I'm sure that I spend at least 40 hours out here a week. Mostly because I don't have much else to do. And then of that grocery bill, a very small percentage of that would be stuff that I can grow in the garden. Now, a lot of you are saying to yourself, you can grow everything you need in a garden to supply all your food needs, and I disagree. You could, I will give you that, but it's not something I want to do. For one, I like meat. I'm a meat eater. And I'm proud of it. And for all of those of you who are out there saying to yourselves, man, everybody needs to be vegan. Everybody needs to stop eating meat. To those people I say, shut the hell up. I like meat. I'm going to continue to eat meat until it just becomes completely undoable. If the last cow was walking the earth, I would probably be out there looking to figure out how to get that cow to a butcher. Now, I gotta admit, with that being said, we don't eat a lot of beef. Matter of fact, we went out to eat here recently and had a steak. But other than that, I haven't bought beef in a very long time. By the way, the gnats are miserable, so if you see me waving randomly in front of my face, you know what's up. And gnats live in the ground, so the more you disturb the ground, the more they come out. So, of the groceries that we would buy if I didn't have a garden, vegetables would probably only be about, I don't know, maybe 10-20% of of the total grocery bill. Just keep in mind, grocery bills aren't just about groceries. It's about toilet paper, and paper towels, and laundry soap, and cleaning products, and so on. At least for us, and I imagine for most families. That you don't go to the grocery store and just buy groceries. Maybe you do. I mean, some do. I'm not here to judge. But, so that brings me back to, with all the work I put into the garden, why? Is it really profitable? Well, I think it is, for a couple of reasons. One, you start buying organic veggies, and that increases the cost substantially. Because we grow things without fertilizer and without pesticides, which means I spend less on fertilizer and pesticides. I somehow can charge more, which is odd. And so I always thought it was interesting when you get things that are dye-free, products that don't have this additive and don't have that additive, and somehow or other they cost more. How is that? I don't get that. But anyway, I do understand on the organic vegetable side, because to keep the bugs off and keep produce growing without a lot of fertilizers and things of that nature, it becomes a lot more labor intensive. So it costs more time, and time is money, and labor is not cheap. Getting more expensive as we go with these new laws on minimum wage, which I'm all for, by the way. I won't get into politics too much yet, but I think at some point I'm going to talk about some of my political leanings. But anyway, so organic veggies are more labor intensive, so of course they're going to cost more. But I do think that because it's popular, it costs more than it should, in my opinion. So, back to the original question. Why do I bother? Well, this is one reason. I'm out here on a beautiful day in my garden, pulling weeds. I'm not at some job somewhere getting stressed out because my customers are a pain, my boss is a pain, traffic sucked, yada yada, so on and so forth. Cats and dogs living in sin. I hate my life. I don't hate my life. I have a good time in my life. Also, I can walk away from this just because I want to go get a snack. Just because I ain't feeling it for the day. Just because anything. Whatever. I'm my own boss when it comes to growing my own food. So, that is one added benefit. Can it make sense financially? It can, depending on how you go about it. I'm in a lot of these Facebook groups, which if you guys are out there looking for me on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, I haven't yet done that for a couple of reasons. And I don't know that I will anytime in the real near future. I may, I don't know. We'll see. I wasn't real keen on doing a YouTube channel until I started doing it, so, attitudes change. Sometimes you come up with a different philosophy. But right now, a lot of the social media seems to be hate media, where everybody's hating on each other, and so on. I'll probably just stick with Facebook for the moment at least. But as far as growing a garden, it does give me a chance to do this, to come out and contemplate life, peace and solitude. Yeah, I got airplanes flying by, but like I've said before, I kind of like it. I mean, it does get to be a pain sometimes when you got to stop your conversation and let the airplane go by. But it's kind of neat being near an airport. One of the things people don't realize is airplanes take off and land based upon wind. So if the wind's out of the east, they'll fly towards the east, fly into the wind to make it easier to take off and land. So that means that only about half the time, depending on the prevailing winds where you are, do you have to worry about aircraft noise. Or at least not as much. We're very close to the airport. I mean, planes taking off and landing make a lot of noise around here, which we knew when we bought the place. So you won't see me calling the airport and complaining like I've heard some people do. I always thought it was neat back in the day when I was stationed in California. There was a big uproar in Los Angeles. People who bought homes out by the airport, LAX, got them really cheap because they were near the airport, particularly back in that day. And then as the homes got more and more, they all got together and decided to start complaining about the airport, how much noise it made. And I'm like, that's how you get your house cheap. It's because you bought near the airport. Now you want to sit down and complain about the airport. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And of course, you know, airplanes are quieter now. I mean, if you ever are close to an airport and hear a really old aircraft take off and land, man, they are loud. I mean, we get some old military aircraft that come in and out of here because we have a Air Force Reserve or Air National Guard, one of the two, I can't remember which, out here on our airport. And you know, being, you know, the reserve component of the military, they fly older aircraft. Man, they are loud, let me tell you what. Comparing those to the newer aircraft are just a huge difference. But so one of the reasons I garden is because I like it. I enjoy it. It's a hobby, it's a pastime, keeps me busy, keeps me moving, and gives me an opportunity to sit out here and think about life, contemplate things, get a little peace. Another reason why I garden is because I know, one, where everything came from. I mean, a lot of people just don't have any idea of where things come from. I remember when I was a kid, I had this guy in Youthville with me named Jack Knobloch. If you're out there, Jack Knobloch, send me a tell. That's my video game thing going on. Yeah, send me a message, man. I would love to hear from you. I haven't seen you since the 70s, early 70s. Anyway, but one of the things was neat, because he was a city boy, you know, as much as city boys can be city boys in Kansas. He's like, we were talking about cucumbers and making pickles, and he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I want to grow some cucumbers and make pickles. And he's like, well, can't you just grow a pickle tree? And he was convinced that pickles grew on trees. I had no idea that pickles are actually cucumbers that have been pickled. And not knocking him at all. He was a kid. He didn't know better. But the thing is that people don't realize, in a lot of cases, where their food comes from. Like, I guarantee you, if people ever went to a slaughterhouse and had to watch cattle getting killed and cut up, they might be a little squeamish about eating that beef. Munching down on that steak. It's not a pretty process. They kill the animal, and, take the skins off, cut it up into small pieces so we can take it home and eat it. Now, while I've never butchered a cow, as a young man I used to hunt, so I know how things work. But gardening is kind of the same way. People really have no idea, one, what it takes to grow a vegetable, how much work goes into it, and what makes a good vegetable and what makes a bad vegetable. They also expect perfection. You see people at the grocery store, you get a little spot on a tomato, they don't want it. Which I gotta admit, if I'm buying groceries from the grocery store, I don't either. I try and get the ones that are in the best shape. That's just what we do. But when it comes to growing your own, you're a lot more willing to accept. So, but it's good to know where your food comes from. Then along with that, I know what's been put on my vegetables. I know how they were grown. Where they were grown. And by who. Whose hands have touched it. And I know that I don't have to worry about, washing the dyes and waxes and insecticides and other chemicals off of my vegetables. I mean, I do wash my vegetables, but I don't have to worry that they might be bad for me because of stuff that's been put on them, because I know what exactly got put on them. So that's one advantage. And then two, even though I did make the case that when it comes to labor cost, veggies can be very expensive. If you really sat down and thought about the amount of labor put into it versus the amount of products received, you might find that your veggies are expensive. But if you take the labor out, consider it a labor of love or a hobby, and then start looking at the actual cost, I mean, these onions, for example, I bought a set of onion sets, which were relatively cheap. I can't even remember how much they were. I know they weren't more than $5. Put them out, and now I've got onions. Alright, so, this amount of onions that's growing right behind me here, I would just say they're $1 a piece, and I've got at least 30 there, so you're talking $30 out of about a $5 investment, which is a pretty good investment, considering it only took a year to gain that investment. Now, did that increase my net worth? Not really. But it did mean that I got $30 worth of, assuming my math is correct, $30 worth of veggies for $5, if you don't count the labor or the opportunity cost, because I could be working. I don't know if y'all have ever had an economics class, but anytime you do something, there's the cost and then there's the opportunity cost. And what an opportunity cost means is, what could I have been doing to make more money instead of doing this? All right. But that can also be a fallacy because, I could make more money, but would I really be willing to do that? And then there's more costs that go with that you can get really complicated and deep in the weeds on all this. But for me, it is definitely well worth it. So that's one thing. I do believe that for me, the cost is well worth it. The labor for me is free because I've got plenty of time. In fact, I enjoy it. I have a good time doing it. It gives me a sense of satisfaction. I mean, I'm not out here, woohoo, just giggling away and just having a ball. Of course, that's because I don't drink while I'm gardening. Maybe if I was getting drunk while I was gardening, I'd have a better time. I don't know. The hangovers are really bad once you get older, I should say. But I enjoy it. I mean, I like watching things grow that I planted. It is a very satisfying thing. And I will tell you that this is a recession-proof, apocalypse-proof, within certain limitations, occupation. No matter how bad the economy gets, growing a garden is never going to be a huge problem. I wouldn't think. I mean, I can't imagine an apocalypse that would make it a problematic venture. So another reason that I garden, or one of the primary reasons, is sustainability to a certain extent. One, I have a sustainable product here. And by that I mean I'm not getting a bunch of inputs. One, I don't buy fertilizer, I don't buy weed killer, I don't buy insecticides. So that means I'm not supporting chemical companies. It means I'm not, adding to the transportation costs that our society is paying by, having stuff delivered from other countries, other locations. I mean, we live in Florida, in a great area to grow things. And yet a lot of our produce and food comes from California. And that means that at a minimum it has to come all the way across the country on a truck or on a train or on a plane to get here so that I can eat it. I'm not faulting you if that's what you want to do. Now please keep in mind that, when I tell you here's my philosophy, I'm not trying to inflict my beliefs upon you or tell you what you should do. I guess what I'm trying to do is just tell you what I do, how it works out, and give you some ideas. I heard a thing here recently that really kind of irritated me, where, some young kid, I'm assuming, I don't know how young, on the internet, talking about how, you got nothing for me, I don't need to respect you, just because you're older doesn't mean you know any more than I do, and so your advice means nothing, I'm not going to follow it, like, yada yada, so on and so forth. And that's fine, if that's where you want to go through life. But I will tell you, that's a rough road to hoe, man. One of the beauties of humans is that we have the ability to impart our knowledge to the next generation. And so, if you completely discount that knowledge, and those that it comes from, and the experiences that they've had, you are limiting yourself to your own successes and failures rather than those of others, in my opinion. And I'm going to tell you what, you want to find out about life, go ask people who've lived for a while. There's nothing like experience to teach you what's what. But anyway, back to the original subject. I like knowing where my food comes from. I like the pride I can have in knowing that I grew it. And from a sustainability standpoint, the idea that it comes from my backyard and is the product of my labor makes it hugely sustainable. Environmental cost for my garden is next to nothing. I mean, every once in a great while I will run my rototiller. The last time I started my rototiller, it actually didn't want to start because it had been so long since it had been run. I do run my lawnmower, and I use the grass clippings for mulch. It does cost some for the environment, but overall it's a pretty sustainable operation. You know, I don't get a lot of exterior inputs. Whereas the grocery store food that you get, some of it comes from Costa Rica, California. Do you know that most of America's garlic comes from China? Which, I mean, garlic is one of the easiest things in the world to grow. Though this year my garlic crop was kind of sad. But I think it was due to watering issues, which I'll cover in a video at some point. At any rate, so that does make it more sustainable. I mean, I walk out to my backyard and get what I need for a salad instead of having to have it shipped from Costa Rica. Now, some of you might say, well, that's not fair to the Costa Ricans who are counting on us to buy their food and to improve their economy. Yeah, whatever. I mean, there's always somebody that can tell you something, you know, what you're doing is wrong. And feel free, I mean, please. Tell me what you think I'm doing wrong, and I will listen. I will read your comments, and then happily ignore them if I don't agree. As you should feel free to happily ignore whatever I tell you here. Because advice is a unique thing. Well, I think it is important to listen to what other people have to say, particularly people who've been around a while and seen some things and done some things. You want to learn how to garden, you'll find some old dude that's been gardening forever. He'll tell you what's up, particularly in your area, what grows well, what doesn't. And of course, you know, that's going to be his experiences and not necessarily the Bible on gardening. But it is very wise to listen to the wise. And what does wisdom come from? Wisdom comes from experience. You get kicked in the teeth enough, and you'll learn to protect your mouth. That's just the way things work. So I like the sustainability side of things, because I do believe that we need to take better care of the earth. I do believe that we need to foster that in others. You know, I've talked to all my kids and anybody else who would listen to me. And that's a lot of what this channel's about, is, you know, trying to give people an option, a way of doing things that is better for you and better for the planet. And I gotta admit, you know, for a very long time I didn't really give two shits about all that. Didn't really pay attention to it until I started really looking into it and finding out what's going on. And I mean, I'm not trying to be a prepper or anything, but we could be coming up on some dark days if things don't change, and if what people are predicting is actually going to come about. We could be looking at some bad times ahead. Which brings me to the next point. I'm not a prepper in the classic sense. Not a homesteader. I'm not going to go live out in the woods and, you know, never use electricity. Matter of fact, sometime in the near future, I want to put out a video on why I don't want to be a prepper or a homesteader. We'll save that topic for then. But we, as a race, human race, have kind of screwed things up. We've gotten too big, for one. There's just too many of us. Two, we've gone about things in a way that is counterproductive. It is causing problems. Though, I mean, a lot of what is happening now would not be possible without, well, actually, all of what is happening now would not be possible without all the things that have happened in the past. So it's easy to say, well, matter of fact, I heard somebody online here very recently blaming everything on us baby boomers. And I am one of those. I'm at the back end of it. One of the last few generations of the baby boomer generation. But I am a baby boomer. And all of the country's ills are being blamed on people like me. Old, white, straight baby boomers, particularly those of a certain political leaning, are to blame for all the ills that have befallen the earth. And I mean, some of that blame has to be taken, but I have found in my life that if you sit around and trying to find the person that you can blame everything on, all that really does is give you an excuse for not doing something different, for not changing it, for not making it better. Alright? If you want to blame the generations prior to you, you can do so. But I would love to see all those people pointing fingers go back in time and try and figure out a better way, because there just really wasn't that we were aware of then. And I'm a big proponent of something I've always told my kids is wherever you go, there you are. You can sit around and whine about how you got there, complain about how you got there, try and find fault for how you got there. Well, it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. My daddy did that, and my mama did this, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't change where you are. It doesn't change the circumstances you were in. And so, it's like the old, I watch a lot of ID, right? And, they're always trying to bring closure for the family. And if you really talk to the family members, or when they do talk to the family members, you find that closure doesn't really happen. And I'm not saying by any means that these people should not be found guilty and punished for the crimes that they've committed, but trying to say that it's going to somehow or other make things better, oftentimes is just a fantasy. I mean, you can sit around and blame me and people like me all you want. Some of it is fair, though I got to say that people tell me I should be apologetic and embarrassed and ashamed of what my ancestors have done, all the bad things they've done. Well, I got news for you. I'm not apologetic and ashamed of some of the bad things I've done, let alone what my ancestors did. And I do believe that trying to hold later generations at fault for the crimes of previous generations is possibly one of the stupidest things I've ever heard of. But of course, that could be because I'm a old, straight, white dude, who's a baby boomer. And, all those baby boomers are evil. But anyway, I guess my point is going back to why I garden. One of the things I do it for is because a lot of the people I knew growing up gardened, and they all seemed fairly healthy. Though a lot of them didn't live as long as perhaps they should have. But, that's back in the day, the generation I grew up with, everybody smoked. Everybody drank. Medical care was nowhere near what it is today. Some of them lived long lives. Others did not. But I think as a generation, I think they were healthier. And I think a lot of that has to do with the foods they ate and how they got those foods. I mean, back in the day, the idea that you would get vegetables from Costa Rica would have been crazy. You'd been laughed out of town for something like that. But that's why I grow my garden, is partially a sustainability factor. And it's not only sustainable for me, but I'm helping to improve the environment by not having stuff shipped in, and I'm growing stuff that is not just grass. I mean, I have a pretty good sized lot here. I mean, it's like a 3/4 acre, like 0.70 acre lot is what I think it's on the survey. And if I just grew grass in it, it wouldn't be all that helpful for the planet. But by growing trees and vegetables, improving the soil, and helping to put some of that carbon back into the soil, it is actually helping to remove carbon from the air, which is my little part. Try and help the environment a bit. And then by not using chemical fertilizers, I don't risk the runoff factor of excess fertilizers being dumped out into the ocean. And I have a septic tank. So one of the things I liked about this house is it had a septic tank, so that means my poop doesn't get washed out into the ocean. Doesn't require processing. And as soon as I get to the point where I can start pulling some of my money out of various investments I have, I'm going to do a few more things like solar power and a well, so that I rely less and less on the grid. And fossil fuels to clean my water and to provide power for my house, which I'm a big proponent. I think everybody should try and do the best they can to lower the footprint of our locality, our state, and our nation on the overall impact on the environment. Whether you believe in global warming or not, the idea that, one, you can generate your own power from just the sun or wind, as the case may be, and that you can grow your own food without having to have it brought in somewhere, is a great thing for the environment. I mean, I've heard people guesstimate that if we could just become more sustainable in our food generation practices, it might solve the whole problem. Because the way we've gone about growing food and producing crops has been bad for a very long time. But, common wisdom back in the day, it's always been that if you want to grow food, this is the way you got to do it. And that was not only propagated by companies. Everybody wants to blame the evil companies. Well, evil companies don't exist if people don't buy their products. And I know that was a very common thing back in the day. This is the way you grow food. If you try doing it any other way, you'll never be commercially viable. So, I mean, I understand why we did what we did, but now we know better. It might be time to do something different. And I no longer live in Kansas, but I have friends there that I talk to, and they've assured me that in Kansas, at least, sustainability has become a huge thing. Yeah, apparently, a lot of farms in Kansas are starting to do a much better job of sustainability. A lot of people are cover cropping, interplanting, doing grass-fed animals, free-range animals where possible, and overall giving some serious thought to what's good for the planet as well as what's good for their pocketbook. So I gotta say, I mean, you know, the pocketbook rules, at least in this society. I wrote a paper once when I was in college about, you know, getting rid of fossil fuels. And I said then and I'll say it again now, that as long as fossil fuels are the cheapest way to go, the least expensive means of transportation and power generation, they will still stick around. As soon as they become commercially unviable, too expensive, too hard to get, whatever the case may be, then it will become less common to see these as primary sources of power. And that's just a fact of life. Because I mean, you want to convince people to do something, it's got to come from a financial standpoint in a lot of cases. Though I got to say, I'm actually kind of surprised that a lot of people have taken up gardening, despite the belief, at least on their part, that it is more expensive than buying groceries at a grocery store. Which I will tell you, if you are paying more for your produce in your garden than you do at the grocery store, you're doing it wrong. Now, I will say, you know, with that being said, that, you know, once you add opportunity cost in there, which I did explain, basically it's the, you know, taking away that opportunity to go get a second job instead of pulling weeds in the garden, for example. That does change the dynamic there. But, you know, if you're paying more to grow groceries than you are to buy groceries, then, in my opinion, you are doing it completely wrong. I think that's, you know, a huge fallacy. But now, with that being said, I will say that, like, I'm willing to accept imperfection. Where a lot of people see a blemish on their fruit and get upset, have to try and figure out, well, what's wrong with my plant? I need to do this, I need to kill the bugs, I need some BT, I need some neem, I need this, I need that, and I need some fertilizer. And of course, organic fertilizer is much more expensive than, you know, chemical fertilizer, so that costs me a ton of money. I can understand how people can get to that point where it seems like it's more expensive, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like, once I'm done pulling these weeds up, I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm going to cover this with some mostly broken down compost. And that compost will work its way down into the soil over time. And then after I do that, I am going to spend some gas to mow my yard. But I'm in a homeowners association anyway, so it's not like I can decide to not do that. And then I'm going to use those grass clippings as a mulch layer. That'll do a couple things for me. That'll enrich the soil, it'll protect the soil and the life within the soil, and eventually all of that carbon, because pretty much all life is based in carbon, rather than getting put into a landfill somewhere, will actually support more and better, more diverse life, which will put out oxygen and put roots down into the ground, put carbon back into the ground, support bacterial and microbial life in the soil, which is where a lot of the carbon sink comes from. Yes. not really so much from the plant roots as it is from the microbial life that gets supported by having an ecosystem in the ground. So if we, estimates have said that if we could do just that one thing and get the microbial life back to where it was in pre-industrial days, that would go a long ways towards solving any sort of impending crisis or global warming and all of the consequences that may or may not come from that. So, which is also part of why I garden. I think it's a responsible thing to do. I really do believe everybody should have a garden. Back in the day they called them victory gardens, but that was a whole other deal. That was so that we could fight a war and send the produce that we grew off to support troops, both our American troops and Allied troops, for a huge world war. Which, anyway, that's a whole other subject I won't get into, but being a military member, I will tell you, the idea of fighting wars on foreign soil is just ridiculous to me. So I gotta say that had we not, we might all be speaking German now. Which, I don't know. German language, to me, as an American, always seems angry. Like you're just mad. Which I know is not true. But, it's just always the impression I get. But anyway. So, I guess to recap, there's many reasons why I like to garden. One, it's a great pastime. So I guess to recap, there's several reasons why I like to garden. One, I love the produce. I love knowing where the produce comes from. Two, I think it helps the planet. I think that, well, I'm not trying to be a virtue signaler, which I think is crazy. I think that, it's one little thing that I can do to make things better. All right. I guess another thing I haven't really talked about is I believe the things you grow in your own garden taste better. But now that may be the camping effect, which what I mean by that, and if you've never been camping, you probably won't understand this, but I guarantee you, if you go camping and cook food while you're camping, that is going to be some of the best food you've ever eaten. And I can't really give you a why, but I guarantee you that if you're a camper, you'll know what I'm talking about. I really do believe that food does taste better when you grow it yourself. It's just one of them things where, it's partially the pride thing. It's also the idea that, the varieties that you grow tend to be better tasting because, the concentration isn't on shelf life and so on. So it's more on taste. And then, you get to choose which varieties you grow based upon, growing conditions and taste. Which tastes better to you. What do you like better? Another reason that I like gardening is it keeps me busy. I'm retired, and I retired at a fairly young age because I could, which is another thing I highly recommend for those of you who have the ability to do so. Once again, from a purely sustainability standpoint, it's fantastic. I'm not going to work and driving on the streets and sucking up gas to get back and forth, and just that alone helps things overall. But at any rate, so I'm retired, and if I didn't do this, I mean, I don't know what else I'd do. You know, maybe I can go volunteer somewhere, but if I'm volunteering, it's kind of like going back to work. If I'm going to go back to work, I might as well get paid, you know. Though there's a lot of good that can be done with volunteering, and I highly recommend it. When you start looking at the sustainability standpoint of it, I mean, if I'm driving, you know, the same amount of time as I would working, then, you know, it's really not all that sustainable. Though there are projects and things you can do to help with sustainability and to help with the environment, I still think retiring is a fantastic idea. And again, as far as sustainability, I'm not a prepper, but I do believe in being prepared. You know, if everything went to hell in a handbasket tomorrow, I mean, I could eat off of what I've got growing here for a while. You know, I saw a thing today, actually. I was talking about how most people do not have the ability to survive 30 days without a grocery store. 30 days without the whole network of things that we rely upon. I believe I could, for me and my family. There's a lot of things that are edible around here that I don't eat as much as I could, primarily because of the fact that, you know, I don't need to. But I also believe that everybody ought to try, at least, and build some of that sustainability in. You know, one of the big issues that happened here recently when the pandemic took off was running out of toilet paper. I mean, you know, you can take a dump without toilet paper. But we won't get into all that. But there are a lot of old ways that the old people knew to get by in life without a lot of the things that we think are absolutely necessary. I will tell you that my grandparents lived out in the country and didn't spend a lot of time in grocery stores. Though at the end of his life, my grandfather did work for one. They grew mostly everything they needed from what they had. If you look back at old houses, you'll see that they all have bigger yards. That wasn't for growing grass, that was for growing a garden, for growing fruit trees. You know, on this property alone, right now, I've lost count, but I've got somewhere around 50 fruit trees and bushes of various different types and so on. And that's not just because I think they're pretty, which I think they are, and not just because they put oxygen back into the air, which they do, but it's also because, you know, if push ever comes to shove, as these fruit trees mature and start producing regular fruit, I will have fruit pretty much 24/7. If things go the way I'm planning them to go, then I will have fruit of some sort throughout the year. And then that doesn't even count all the things that I can and preserve and put away for later. That's just fruit actually physically growing at any point during the year. So I like that knowledge that if push comes to shove, I have that capability. So that's another really important thing, I think, as far as why I like to garden, because it does give me some backup. It gives me the knowledge that, you know, if things get ugly for a while, I have the means to keep going. I have the ability and I have the knowledge on how to grow things and how to keep things growing. I mean, I collect seeds and do a lot of different things, not because I need to, though you really should look into where your seeds are coming from. You'd be surprised how few of them are actually grown here in the United States. But I have that capability. I have the knowledge, I have the experience to be able to grow food and keep myself alive. And then the last thing for gardening is it's just, how do I want to explain it? It's just really cool to get out here, get your hands dirty, get your feet in the dirt, get your hands in the dirt, and to understand, you know, how things work. You know, I'm looking over here and I got zinnias and I got butterflies flying around on them, and it's just really neat, you know. That is so much better than listening to some boss tell me how I haven't met my production goals for the week or whatever the case may be. It's a great way to live. And I think that, in my opinion, is the biggest thing. I am very happy with the way my life is right now. You know, there are things that I could do to improve it. You know, like some of this garden is not growing as well as I wanted it to, but you know, I'm learning, I'm getting better at it. You know, I mean, I wish I had a little more money, as we all do, I'm sure. I could use a new car at some point. But the bottom line is that I'm very pleased with the way my life is going, and a lot of that has to do with me getting out here in the garden on a daily basis and putting around and doing what I think needs to be done. And then knowing that, you know, if I decide I don't want to do it for a day or 2 or 3 or 4, I can do that. So those are a lot of my reasons. So if I had to make a short list, all right, 1, I like the produce. It tastes a lot better in my opinion. 2, I like knowing that I made the produce. 3, I like getting out here and doing it. 4, I think it helps the planet. All right, that's my big gist on why I garden and why I think, you know, most other people should also garden. So that being said, I'm gonna let you go. I finish up weeding my patch here. Thanks for stopping by and listening to me ramble. If you like this format, you like what I'm talking, not even necessarily the subject matter, but if you like the way I'm doing this, please let me know. You know, I'm trying something new, trying to do something a little bit different, and see how y'all react to it. And it gives me a chance to just express what I'm thinking or feeling for the day. So, you know, give me a like if you like it. If you don't, then give me a thumbs down, you know, or give me a comment. In the meantime, you know, grow something. Get yourself going in the garden. You'll find that, you know, it is healthy. It is able to be done very inexpensively. And it's very, very rewarding. All right, so thanks for stopping by. Y'all take care and come back and see me.